Look down, you're talking to your...
A clown. That's clown shit.
Look down, you're talking to your highness. Can't see me, I'm the reason for your blindness. They tried this, but...
Welcome back to So You Want to Be a Game Master. Today we're going to talk about something I have brought up a few times, running a module. For those of you who don't know, a module is a pre-written adventure for a tabletop RPG such as this one. As I've stated in previous videos, I do recommend running a module for your first game for three main reasons. They give you all the info you need to run the game, they cut down on prep time, and they're usually pretty adjustable. Though I wouldn't recommend making adjustments to modules until you have a bit more experience in the system. As far as prep time goes, as opposed to homebrew where you have to write everything yourself, a module should have the story and all of the encounters, NPCs, and monsters set out for you, leaving you to focus on the stats and your players. Also, you find running modules will give you an idea of how to run your own games in the future. What if I want to run a homebrew game? I knew this was coming. The building and running of a homebrew campaign is not something I could cover in a single 1-minute video. So I guess consider this part 1 of So You Want to Be a Homebrew Game Master. So where to start building a homebrew campaign? Personally, I like to start at the end. Or more accurately, with the end boss. By creating a villain or antagonist and fleshing out their goals, their background, and where they're working from, you'll find the rest of the story and game often falls into place. This uses what I call the ripple effect. For instance, let's say that our villain is a mad dwarven engineer. Working from an abandoned mountain factory, they're building mechanical siege weapons to take over the world. How do his experiments affect the mountain, the environment, the water supply? Where do your heroes come into this? Answering these questions can start you off on a great campaign.
How do I get my players to roleplay?
This is actually a fairly common question for up-and-coming GMs, but it's important to acknowledge at first that some players, like GMs, won't be comfortable with roleplay. Comfort levels with roleplay is something that should be discussed in your session 0. That out of the way, I offer you two methods: the reward system and coaxing. The reward system is pretty self-explanatory. If you notice a good roleplay moment that one of your players has, reward them with a small boost. I'm a particular fan of the reroll token. Coaxing is a little more direct. If you have a player that is just narrating what their character says, you can prompt roleplay, like saying, "How would your character say that?" or "Tell me what that looks like." Finally, if you want your players to roleplay needs to feel meaningful in your game. That sounds vague, but I hope it makes sense. Today's subject is running what you know. Is there a fandom or world that you have completely absorbed? Read every book, watched every episode, hoovered up every last morsel of lore you can find? I'm looking at you, Tolkien fans. Then, my friend, I am happy to announce that what you have in your head is now the perfect basis for a tabletop game. Even if it's just one book that you enjoyed, you can still run that as a story for a tabletop game. You might also be surprised to learn that a lot of fandoms already have dedicated tabletop systems. If not, there are a range of systems that should work with pretty much any world. I deeply hate needlessly chaotic characters. In moments like this, it is important to remember that while you are all sitting around a table to play a game that you have created, you are all still friends. If I were not at the D&D table and I were out in public with a friend and they were being chaotic, I would talk to them about it. The GM-player relationship shouldn't change that. So if you're having trouble with a chaotic player, just take them aside after the game and talk to them about how it's affecting the game and figure out a way you can fix it. And this conversation should be a two-way street. Maybe they reel in their behavior for most of the game and you give them an opportunity every so often to really let the chaos reign. As in all things tabletop related, communication is vital. Do you have a GM checklist you fill out before a campaign? Not officially, but if I did, this would be it. Number 1. Details on the villain and their plot. These details will give you a pretty good foundation for the rest of your campaign. I cover this more in my GM Tips Homebrew video. Number 2. Major NPCs and locations. Flesh out any NPCs or locations you expect your players to be interacting with. Number 3. Forces your villain has at their disposal. Armies, minions, mini-bosses. What horrors are they going to throw at your heroes? Number 4. Plan the first few sessions. You should have your first few sessions planned before you start the campaign, complete with omens and hooks for the main storyline. Today we're going to talk about the GM skill of reskinning. Let me paint a picture for you. Spend hours building and fleshing out a thieves guild at the town your party is currently located in. The expectation that your party may need some underground assistance in the near future. Suddenly your party leave town and do not intend to return. Hours of work down the tube, right? Wrong! Remember that your players only know the information that you have given them, and therefore may not know the details of this thieves guild or that it even exists. So what do? You reskin it. Perhaps they will find it in the next town they go to. No, this is not the White Raven Guild of Metagold, this is the Wolf Pack of Marlborough. You'll find it saves you a lot of prep time and frustration. Oh yeah, I got this. When integrating backstory into a campaign, the main thing to think of is, what can I replace with this? Look for key characters or locations in your character's backstory and see if there's something in the campaign that can be replaced with that. Perhaps one of your players is looking for a sibling that disappeared years ago. Guess who the villain's newest henchman is? One of your players looking for their ancestral homeland? Remind me, what was that place that the villain has corrupted for his own vile intentions? The world is your playground. However, it is important to ask your players' permission before using certain themes in your story. Remember that not all players are here for a heavy and consequence-filled experience. This is, after all, meant to be fantasy. Let's get one thing perfectly clear. As far as I'm concerned, with tabletop games, as with most things in life, you get out what you put in. This may sound harsh, but it's because I've heard so many stories of players showing up to games with cardboard cutout characters and then expecting an inclusive experience. If your players don't give you a backstory, you don't need to include it. And trust me, when they see how much the other players get out of their backstory bits, their next character's gonna have backstory. Now, if you want to be nicer than me, maybe as part of your session 0, you run them through some basic story prompts. Ask the player questions like, how does your character feel about your homeland? When you left the temple, someone was unhappy. Who was it? This can give you some good backstory moments for that character. Absolutely. First thing you want to do is treat each army regiment or the army in total as a single unit. I would usually run this that the hit points are the amount of soldiers in that army, but you've also got to consider morale. As with any fight, when one side starts to lose, some of them are going to run. Obviously, this rule shouldn't apply to creatures big enough to stand on their own in war, e.g. giants, dragons, that sort of thing. From there, the war really becomes more of a living backdrop for your party session. You'll be fighting their way through the battle towards the enemy commander to end this war when suddenly... You see, the right flank of their defenses is starting to falter. Do they press onto the commander, or assist their allies? I will probably do another video on this because this is an area that I really want to work on. Today we're diving a little bit deeper into running full-scale war. For this episode I will be pulling mostly from my usual system, Fantasy Age. Green Ronin sponsorship maybe? While military strength through an army is important, it is equally important in war to have a good commander. Your commander, or commanders, should have good knowledge of war and leadership skills. There, for a more involved war experience, the battle is split up into 3 stages. Opening move. This is your skirmishers being sent out and getting a lay of the land and the opposing force for your commander. Main engagement. Steel meets steel as the bulk of your forces clash in the ultimate test of discipline and morale. In finishing moves. The shield wall is broken and your commander's tactics are put to the test as the battle draws to a close. Will you achieve victory?
How do I keep dungeons interesting?
When building or running a dungeon, the main question that you need to keep in mind is why. Why is the dungeon there? Who built it? Was it a hideout, a vault, or a prison? Same thing goes for traps. Why is it there? What's it protecting? Is it keeping people out, or something in? Answering these questions will give you a very interesting and rich experience for your players to play through. When running a dungeon, especially a longer dungeon, you should consider allowing your players to find ways around combat. Of course, your player characters can and probably will murder hobo their way to Kingdom Come, but having that hammered home as the only option can get a little dull. There are 1,000 other ways to deal with an enemy or obstacle. And if a player comes up with a clever or creative solution to a problem, let them roll for it, give it a shot. This kind of depends on a few things. Mainly because there are a few locations and situations in tabletop games that it is very difficult to shoehorn in a character. However, that is what I am here for. First tip would be collaborate with your player. Sit down with your new player and explain this current situation of the game. Then figure out how you could fit that character in. A few of my favorites are the prisoner. Party is traveling through a dungeon or stronghold when they find your player in a prison cell. Hero in distress. Your party is traveling a long dusty road when they find the hero beset by monsters. And every GM's favorite, the babysitter. A temple has sent your party on a quest, but to ensure it's done right, they've sent a member of their order with you. This really only works if they're a cleric or paladin. Hell yeah! Climb aboard the dragon's den and we'll find you a sea creature. Never do it again. First off, I'm going to assume that you're running D&D and that you might not have one of these. But there are a number of sea creatures in here that you could use for a pirate campaign. Mofo, arrows, dragon turtles, or the classic kraken. And there are ways to run these big beasties for lower level parties. But I think the encounter that all pirate lovers crave is that of the dead man's ship. Dark pirate ship that cannot be sunk, entirely crewed by dead men. Stat-wise, this crew is really just zombies with a swim speed and some sort of water-based teleport or fear ability. Well, I'm not brave enough for politics. Fine. The first thing you have to consider here is your factions. Whether the conflict in your game is violent, political, or both, you need to flesh out all of your factions' goals, their desires, their secrets, and what they're willing to do to get their way. And there will always be some factions that are more prone to shady behavior. Second, if you want to play in shades of grey, then both sides need to be reasonable, but a little bit on the dark side. It's called grey for a reason. And finally, you need to be adaptive enough to react to your players' choices. Players might pick a side, they might not. They might turn into double agents or start running this war for profit. Again, fleshing out your factions will help on how to run this. Thank you for your comment and for watching. Please follow for more and comment anything stopping you from running games. I'd love to help you become a game master. Bye.